It's a new financial year, which means it's time for a new challenge. Roll the music. Hello and welcome to yet another Scuffed Hammer video. This year I've decided to set myself the challenge to complete an entire 2k army in the space of 12 months. And that's a little bit nuts because I have never done anything close to that before. So why don't we get into it? While I'm batch painting, I'll explain to you a little bit behind the reason and some of the lore for this new homebrew faction that I've made. And of course explaining some of the painting techniques. Oh, and as it says on the thumbnail, I'll be painting 43 models in one go. I'm going to start off by doing the bases, as it's an easy win to knock out pretty quick. And I won't be putting the models on the bases to paint anyway, because it'll be too hard to reach into all the cracks and crevices that are going on with these Tyranid models. I'm going for a moon-like base, so I'm using this volcanic earth that you can see here before I add some rocks and lock it down with some super thin super glue before base coating. Now that's out of the way, why don't we talk about why I have decided to do this. The primary reason is that I have never painted that much within the space of a year, and I thought that I would like to challenge myself and prove to myself that I am able to do it. The other reason is that I came up with yet another homebrew scheme that I decided I finally wanted to paint an army for. So, why Tyranids? The real reason is because I don't love Tyranids. They're alright, but I'm not super into their lore or anything, which means I know that once the challenge is done, I'm not going to feel the need to buy more and expand the army. Now, I'm going to cut down about 45 minutes of building footage down to 2 or 3 minutes while I tell you about the homebrew lore, the real world connections, and the painting scheme I have planned for this entire 2k army. Splinter Fleet Bakunawa is a remnant of Hive Fleet Kraken, which, after its defeats at Itkar IV and Iodin, splintered into many different fleets. The fleet of Bakunawa carries on its parent fleet's heritage by employing tactics of speed, flanking, and camouflage. But how does one camouflage with the inky black void? Bakunawa biologically adapted a bluey black skin and a black carapace covered in white flecks that look like stars when viewed from a distance. But not all Tyranids in this fleet employ this camouflaged scheme. The bigger, more dangerous bioforms take on the appearance of nebulas, displaying bright, shiny colours often used to distract the enemy. Splinter Fleet Bakunawa employs the use of many bioforms adapted to fly, hiding themselves against the skies as they rain down terror and death upon the worlds they choose as their victims. The worlds that never see them coming until it is too late. For there is no warning with Hive Fleet Bakunawa, as to remain completely hidden as possible, they do not deploy the Shadow in the Warp until they have reached their victim. So that's it. That's the lore I have so far. It will continue to grow and expand as more videos come out. When it came to naming my Splinter Fleet, I had to follow the naming convention of using real-world mythology of snake and serpent-like animals. I went searching for the perfect mythological creature, and I eventually found Bakunawa, a colossal serpent-like dragon traditionally believed to swallow the moon, acting as the ancient mythological explanation for lunar eclipses. And I loved that. It absolutely fit with the idea I had in my head for the colour scheme of the models that I would be painting. And I absolutely love the idea that the first an Imperial world knows that Hive Fleet Bakunawa is there is that the moon disappears behind their hive ship. Alright, time for a base coat. As always, you can use your rattle can primer, or as somebody in the comments of my last video said, use brush on primer. Use whatever you have and whatever works for you. Having all of the miniatures set up on these sticks made painting them all a breeze. I had 3 sticks in total for my rippers, and 7 for both my Hormagaunts and my Termagants. And as you can see here, I am doing 2 sticks at once when I possibly can due to shaping and sizing, and it meant I could knock them out in about half the time it would usually take me to knock out some models. We are going to continue with the trend of doing the base first because I've had this idea stewing in my mind for ages and I just want to see if it can work. I'm starting by dabbing on a dark grey, in this case Skavenblight Dinge, in an attempt to 1. Make the process quicker, and 2. Leave some black in the recesses so it looks like the shadows are already there. Then I move on to doing some heavy dry brushing with some Mechanica Standard Grey, and there's nothing special about these paints, they're just what I happened to have laying around. Now with this, I felt like I was a bit too heavy-handed, so to darken it back down, I used some Rattling Grime, which gave it both the perfect colour and the perfect texture, before I lightened it back up with some Brain Matter Beige. I found it really hard to be consistent with the dry brushing for this colour. Sometimes I got it perfect, sometimes I did too much, and sometimes I got the perfect amount. The ones I got perfect I absolutely love, and it's exactly what I was picturing in my mind. By the time I finished my 2K, I'm sure I'll have it down pat. Now that I've finished the bases, it's time to move on to the integral component of my homebrew scheme. I get an old toothbrush, don't worry, it's been sterilized, and I dip it in the paint, no thinning down. I then flick the bristles, making sure to get every piece of carapace armor that I really want to get, and it doesn't matter if it spills over because we will go back and fix this up later. Or, more accurately, it's the next step after the paint dries. I opted to use Black Templar contrast for both a visual reason and a technique reason. The visual reason being that when it dries, it will have a bluey look to it, meaning that when you look closer at it, it will look distinctly different from the black used on the carapace. I also just really love that matte texture that contrast paints seem to leave behind. And the technique reason is that I am doing 43 models, 55 if you count each ripper as an individual model. I am wanting to get through this quickly with as little pain as possible. And contrast paints don't dry lumpy and goopy if you don't spread them out properly. So by using a contrast paint, I can smash through a bunch of models without having to worry that I'm not doing a good enough job and that it's gonna look like ass. And the original concept that gave birth to this whole idea in the first place is that I wanted a scheme that I could do quickly and easily. I love variety in my game, and the best way to do that is with a new army. And I've come up with a few different ideas for easy to paint or low model count armies that I could get done quickly and be able to play when I feel like playing a different style. A couple of those ideas include an Orc army, which is 2 Stompers, a Gorkanaut, a Morkanaut, a set of Killer Cans, and a mech. Another idea is a guard army painted like little green plastic soldiers, base coated in a dark green with a couple of layers of dry brush to bring it up to a brighter colour. And maybe using some other colours that you typically find in toy plastic soldiers like red and yellow and grey for specialist units like Kazakin and tanks and all that stuff a guard player would know and I don't off the top of my head. And if you've had ideas for an easy to paint army or a low model count army, drop it down in the comments below. Now that we've gone through about 4 hours of footage of me painting the same Tyranid models with a contrast paint over and over again, it's time to pick out some of the smaller details. At this stage, I was umming and ahhing between whether I wanted bright white eyes or yellow eyes. So I painted all the eyes with a white ink, and on the spur of the moment, I decided to do all of the magazines for the Hormagaunts the same. And I did this because I knew that if I didn't like it, I could always use a yellow speed paint to get it to the colour that I actually liked. And after seeing them all with bright white eyes staring at me on my table, I didn't like it. From a distance, it just looked a bit too much the same as the white flecks on the carapace. So I decided to pick them all out with yellow, and I think it looks infinitely better. It still captures that essence of a star because stars are yellow, I suppose. Well, some of them are. And with the fact that they have bright glowing eyes that just so happens to match the color emanating from the gun, it almost feels like it's a power within them that's seeping out of their eyes, and it also powers their weapons. Almost like the hive mind visualized on the model, and I think it's fantastic, and I'm 100% going to use that in elements of the models moving forward. I then picked out their teeth with the same wraithbone white that I used for the speckles on their carapace. And I did this a little sloppy. If I wasn't running out of time to get this video done, I probably would have spent maybe an extra hour picking out these teeth in more intricate detail. But at this point, I was running out of time, and I was also kind of sick of painting the same 40 models over and over again, and just wanted to get it done. So they aren't perfect by any means, but I think it adds a little bit of character, like they're mine. One of them looks like he's smirking with an evil grin, and it's absolutely hilarious. I think he's my favorite model in the entire collection. And for the final detail before basing, I use a purple contrast, not because the purple's really going to come through, but because it will add a glossy, kind of almost wet look to the exposed muscle that shows between the skin on these models. I think it also works perfectly for the tongue because it's that wet, glistening muscle, and I think that works perfectly. I also thought it would be hilarious to put it on the exposed ridges on the tip of the gun. Since the gun is technically biological, it's almost like it's shooting the projectiles with a muscle. And bro, I am not gonna lie, I used way too much super glue putting these models onto these sticks because they were a pain in the butt to get off. It was so difficult for literally no reason. And then for the final satisfying part, I get to put these models on their bases. This part was so fun because I did zero planning about how these were gonna sit on the bases. I just hoped for the best, and it was like a puzzle trying to find a spot that every Tyranid could sit on a base where it looked natural and they weren't just going to fall over in a stiff breeze. And somehow I managed to do it. Every single model fit perfectly into its own little nook or cranny, and it looks perfect. Not a single model looks out of place, and they just look like they belong. And it's the crowning achievement of nearly 8 hours of painting 43 models, is that all of them look at home. And with that, it's time for the final reveal. Well, that just about brings us to the end of the video. Although I do have one final thing. And that is, as part of this series, I want to showcase how easy it can be to get a cheaper army than what GW expects you to pay. And that's without any 3D printing or special things like that. So, at the end of each video, I will be displaying the cost I paid for the models. Now, I won't be including shipping or paints or any of the other gear in that, because then it just becomes all too complicated. This is purely just how much I paid for the model versus how much GW expected me to pay. I'll be using services like Facebook Marketplace and discount warehouses to get my models when secondhand models just aren't an option. So, just how much did I pay for this video? I paid $125 for all the models in this video, kind of. That's roughly 45% of the cost that GW would have charged me at $277.50. Now, I said kind of because I only bought 10 Termagants secondhand. The other 10 I bought almost a year and a half ago when I wanted the Lieutenant Titus model and did not care about the Termagants at all. So I'm not factoring that into my price because I would have just eaten that price regardless of whether I was making this series or not. So there we have it. This project is currently standing at 45% of the total GW cost for a new army. Drop down into the comments and tell me what percentage you think we'll end up at the end of this series. The closest person that comments on this video before any other video comes out will get bragging rights when the series is completed. Well, that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.